And we're live. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Business Emergency Room. We are fortunate enough to have a special guest here, Matt Hornbuckle, who's the co-founder and co-CEO of Stant, a just amazing fashion company that allows you to do custom orders, has a storefront and an online presence. And I could think of, especially with what's going on with COVID and everyone dealing with different issues, I wanted to get an entrepreneur on here that has deal with just about everything from supply chain issues to storefront issues to online traffic change issues. You can name it. So this is going to be a awesome conversation. Super excited. Matt, I just wanted, if you want to do like just a quick brief intro of yourself and of Stant, kind of how you started with Stant, and we'll just start the conversation.
Absolutely. So my name's Matt Hornbuckle. We started Stant about 7 years ago now. We've been active for a little over 5 years since we launched the website. Before starting the company, my business partner and I worked at Johnson & Johnson in brand management, working on consumer products. And we, on a daily basis dealt with the frustration of not being able to find clothes that fit. And that was our inspiration to launch a brand that really addresses the issue of people come in all different shapes and sizes. How do we make product that actually fits them versus forcing them into a standard size? Through our analysis, we found that only 15% of guys get a proper fit from a traditional size set. And since launching the business, we've developed a sizing system. We have over 99 unique sizes. Take a couple quick measurements, you get mapped to your size with our algorithm, and then we can make and deliver a garment in only 7 to 10 business days. So it really helps us provide an amazing customer experience, but also do it in an efficient way. So it's something that we can scale without having to raise again to build inventory. It's been quite the journey going through COVID for sure. We're on a roll coming into this year, and I think a lot of people are experiencing something similar where it has had a dramatic impact on our business. And excited to see things slowly coming back, but hasn't been without its challenges.
Great. So it's the tease up our kind of like our first question is, so COVID hits, and as senior executive in your team, as co-CEO, what's your initial response? Like, what do you see? Like, how do you feel it? And like, what do you do? What have you done?
I think it's the biggest challenge was the uncertainty, right? And it was one of those things where you started to see the impact, and then within a matter of a week, there was a much more precipitous drop off. So I think a lot of it was just really processing what was happening and trying to look at things very objectively and say, how bad are they going to get? Our forecasts were very, very bad, given we sell primarily through wholesale as well as we sell dress clothing, two things which were hit hard by the pandemic. We tend to try to be very objective and proactive about the next steps to take. So it was like, okay, this is what's happening. How do we move forward? And it really has fundamentally changed the strategy on the business and what we've been focused on since things happened in March.
So one thing that's real interesting with you guys' side is you have inventory, or you have some shape or form of inventory. How do you manage with uncertainty of demand your inventory issues?
Yeah, I think there's two very unique dynamics to our inventory. So first, it's not finished goods, right? So it's fabric, it's buttons, it's collar stays. So we are, yes, sitting on inventory, but you layer in the fact that we really focus on more timeless styles. We have a customer whose style isn't changing every month or 2 months or 3 months, what's in and what's out. So we're fortunate in that sense that it's something that we can still use in 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, whatever it may be. What we've been watching is how quickly is the inventory getting eaten up, right? And how quickly we do need to reorder more materials to make sure we can keep up with demand, but also really start to bleed the inventory down. I think our big question will be as we come out of this crisis and as customer spending comes back in our category and channels, is making sure we have product to sell, right? So the last thing we want to do is sell product and not be able to fulfill it. So it's something we're watching very closely as the business starts to slowly come back.
So on that, you get some interesting, a lot of talk has been around supply chain and supply chain redundancy, especially if single source from, I know only answer what you can answer, because there's I know you have confidentiality of your company, but a lot of things, when I think apparel and I think of ready-made, I'm thinking sourced through China.
Hmm.
Now I would, and I know you answer only what you can answer, but how do you deal with not only supply chain risk in this factor, but also uh, the political environment of which you could theoretically get cut off from certain supply chain sources? Like, what do you do now?
Yeah, so I think for us, the impact has been relatively low on a supply chain side. There certainly has been an impact, but we don't make in China. What we do get from China are some fabrics and trims and little things like header cards for the swatches that we use. So we've certainly seen an impact on our supply chain. Um, I think the key is finding the right partners here, right? And understanding where the risks are and where can we feasibly build redundancy with a very, very complex supply chain. Think about, we have millions of variants of products to make and everything's made one at a time. It takes a very specific skill set to do that versus, hey, we need a bunch of shirts made. We need 10,000 shirts made in a range of sizes in the same fabric. That's easier to find partners for. So it's something we've been spending a lot of time on.
Right. So if we go back to the original hit with the uncertainty that happens, so what do you do internally? So this uncertainty hits. How did you communicate to your employees, and like what did you, if you're comfortable sharing, what were some of like the internal decisions you had to make and execute?
Yeah, I think the first stage was just processing what was happening, right? And how bad things were going to get. And that was, as an entrepreneur, you almost naturally have to be optimistic, right? Given what you go through and all the roadblocks. And it's like, we're going to get through this. It's going to be better. And we will come out of this better. And I think stronger over time, given our business model. But just appreciating how bad things could get from a revenue perspective and recognizing that. So first step was aligning on those expectations, updating our financial model to say, here's our current picture. This is how we are planning. And the result of that is you need to make budget cuts and make some really hard decisions across the board. And that was one of the first things that we did. And the next stage of that is, again, I think one of the biggest challenges for us is the uncertainty. How fast is the market going to come back? Are people going to buy more online versus our wholesale distribution? We sell through Nordstrom. How quickly are people getting back in a store? Are they going to be comfortable getting measured, et cetera? So now it's very closely watching. What did we forecast? What are we actually doing revenue wise? And how are those tracking to each other and making, it's almost like incremental planning versus on a quarterly basis. It's almost weekly, if not monthly, on the strategic planning side of things. And as we've gotten into the crisis, one of our board members said this to us, is like, never waste a good crisis, right? And what's the silver lining of all the terrible things that are happening right now? And this has given us some space in a weird way where, yes, volumes are down dramatically, but we're spending time in some major strategic areas that are going to put us in a better position coming out of the crisis.
That's great. How you mentioned managing uncertainty from a business perspective and managing it week by week. How do you manage the morale with uncertainty? And like, what are kind of like your general principles with that?
Yeah, I think transparency, right? Look, you have to lead by example, I think, through these crises and with empathy. And one of the first places to start there is transparency. Like we're not hiding things from our team. We're showing them like, here's the numbers we're working against, guys. No matter how brutal they may seem, this is the reality of the situation. And that's something we've always tried to do with the team, right? It's something that's very, very important to both me and Kirk, my co-founder, and a core principle and value of ours. And I think keeping people engaged, right? Doing more video calls. We're all working remotely, right? I've been in my studio apartment for I've lost track of time now. This is Gen 2 of the quarantine period. So it's been that long. So, with people working more and more remotely, it's a different way of doing business, and particularly a product-based business, right? Where we touch and feel. And I have samples all over my apartment right now. So it's how do we keep people really engaged and share and get them involved in some of these big projects is something we're spending a lot of time on.
How are you handling right now customer outreach? You've got, obviously your core group, but like how are you handling, brand awareness from the marketing side of things, especially, this is, I always joke, like the BER is the only time I wear a collared shirt.
Right.
is, and so it's, I preview that I will be asking you future fashion and how you do that at the tail end. So let's not, don't steal my thunder of like my killer question. But how do you deal with that? Because that's, I try to ask it every entrepreneur is like, what are you doing now of outreach to, clientele, suppliers and the like?
Yeah, I think it's like it goes back to empathy, right? So you look at, we sell through some of the best stores in the country, but you have Nordstrom, which is an entity in of itself, right? And they have a lot of power and financial stability. A lot of the stores we work with, it's an individual owner who's built it over his entire lifetime, sometimes multi-generation, and they built these amazing businesses, but it's their livelihood, right? So how do we balance the being very empathetic with the store with, hey, we also need to bring cash in so we can pay our vendors, right, who are putting pressure on us. So one of the things we did very quickly was just tried to talk to the stores. Hey, how are you doing? Wasn't about collecting money. It wasn't about orders. It's just like, hey, we want to check in, make sure you're doing okay. Is there anything we can do to help? And that's something that, it's approaching it from a very human perspective. And it's been interesting seeing some of our vendors. There's some that have been incredibly collaborative, and there's some of them not been collaborative. And I think those things stick with you, especially when you're going through something as severe and as emotional as COVID. So we're really trying to take that approach with our stores and talk to them on a very, very regular basis, as much as they're willing to.
That's great. So before we go any further, I like to open up the chat. Anyone has got a question, it's a good pause moment. Feel free to type it in. I'm not going to wait any further. Just feel free to type it in. We can get back to it. I don't see any questions yet. They must be riveted by our conversation. So let's talk. So one thing that I'm thinking of, is we're pulling out of COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta be careful when I say that because there's no vaccine. There's no this webinar is suddenly been timestamped. So now they know exactly besides the date. Oh, it's there's no vaccine yet. So check. Okay, we know when this was filmed. Before I got a question that's popped in here. So, how do your business? Oh, so let's go to it. I'm gonna do the second one first because it's shorter. Where are your items manufactured?
So we have facilities in Central America and Asia where we make our product right now.
So on that note, so do you want to just explain a little bit of like the order? So like if I'm a general consumer, do I just, after the measurements, do I just place the order on the site and then it's dropship delivered back to me, or?
That or the store. So the core of our customer experience right now is if you go to a Nordstrom, let's say, that's the name most people know, but also many of you on the phone probably know your local men's or department store. You try the shirt, you take 3 measurements, you try the garment on, you really get to hone into the fit that's specific to you, right? Everybody has their own preference from a fit perspective, trimmer, looser, etc. Online, you take our quiz, which asks for a couple inputs, it runs our algorithm. Once you're mapped to your size, picture that as the starting base for your shirt. And then you get to pick out the different fabric, the different collar, cuffs, etc., button colors. And that order is sent to the factory and made just for you, one at a time. And then we ship it either to the store or directly to the customer, depending on what's preferred.
Very cool. Another question that popped in. So I'm gonna try to read this out. So it's kind of like, it's a riff on what your board member said about taking advantage of crisis. So like, how did you take advantage of this situation, pandemic, to get yourself a competitive advantage for your business? And then just general advice to give to other business folk and entrepreneurs to create, how should they, like a template or a rule set for them to figure out a competitive advantage for themselves?
Yeah, I think, let me tackle the second question first. I think the first place is to look at what's inherent in your DNA and your differentiation. And if you don't have that, figure out what that is, but let's assume you have that. For Stance, it's our customer experience and supply chain, where everything is made to order and personalized to you. So if you look at a store who has historically dealt with a lot of inventory, it has always been an issue, but COVID is putting that front and center for a lot of these stores, right? A lot of them just finished their purchases for the season. They have a lot of shirts, pants, garments, whatever it may be in their store. Now they're worried about selling it, right? And people are slowly starting to come back. there's a lot more discounting happening. So it's just really impacting revenues and bottom line and financial stability. So, we believe from a retail perspective, it's going to put more emphasis on what's special to us. And it's the fact that you can get your customer an incredible product that he or she is going to love, but do it without a lot of financial risk, right? You invest in the try-on set and you never have to buy inventory from us. And, imagine what that does for somebody's cash flow and balance sheet.
That's great. So let's go back to what we were talking about with COVID. So COVID is like, you're starting to see states have certain states are more releasing than others from a quarantine perspective. How do you see you testing the waters of a change from the current now of self and government imposed quarantine to a more, once again, we have no idea what the release is going to look like, but how are you starting to like weigh that in and plan for it?
Yeah, I think it's, there's that question of, can people go to the store or not, right? And that's a probably more cut and dry scenario in most places, right? Like New York, stores aren't open yet, right? Especially from a particular retail perspective in clothing. Then the second question becomes, is the customer going to come, right? Just because he or she can doesn't mean that they will. So we're, very closely watching our metrics around how many stores are selling right now. And week on week, we looked at very closely, are there more and more selling? And then what is the output of each store? And, there's this chicken or egg of, you don't want to lean too heavily on your investment in different areas and growth, right? It's just like running the startup as usual or the company as usual. But there's a lot more implications here, right? When the baseline's lower and cash is tighter. So it's something we just watch very, very closely.
Cool. What have you seen different from I'm curious about two things: relationships with vendors and financing. This is the finance mind of me. Like what unique things or different things or surprises have you seen in both arenas? We tackle vendors first.
Yep.
Because it's closely tied with financing. And then I'm curious what you've seen in the world of financing.
Yeah, I think, break down the, let's call it private sector versus government, right? And there's obviously been a lot of challenges and a lot of slip ups with CARES and some of the other government funding pieces. We've been fortunate to be able to tap into some of that, which has been a huge relief for us, right? And is very, very much needed. So I've been impressed by the cash that we've been able to gain access to at very good rates, if not free, right? If you're dealing with some of the PPP forgiveness portion. The process was brutal, right? And there's a lot of other issues that we could probably spend hours on.
We have.
Yes, exactly. So I won't dive too much in there. On the private side, we do have some financing in place from a AR financing perspective, an ABL facility, and our particular partner has been absolutely fantastic. And there's some different factors there that have allowed them to do that I don't want to go into too much detail here, but it goes back to the very same principles with our stores, just communicate, right? They were one of the first 3 phone calls I made when we started implementing our new strategy, and just make sure, hey, this is where we are right now. This is what we're doing. And I think in times like these, over communicate, right? You're not going to share something that is too scary for them or they haven't heard or haven't expected. But I think the worst thing to do is go MIA and then call them when there is a huge issue and something like that. On the equity side, we haven't explored that. I've had some preliminary conversations. We do have some amazing investors, and just being like, okay, if it does come to it, is there capital there if we need it? The typical answer I'm getting and seeing from different people is yes, we're going to support no matter what. The question then becomes, what are the valuations, right? You're in a greatly suppressed category and channel, et cetera. And they obviously want to support, but so that's our kind of full stopgap and not something we're pursuing right now.
So I want to start, let's focus a little bit, future tense now. So I'm curious, let's go for the big overarching question, which will lead a lot, future of fashion. And we've talked a little bit about this ourselves, but I'll go back to the comment I made at the beginning, like the only time I'm wearing a collared shirt, which is probably, hopefully not the same one every recording, is on this, on the BER. And because unless I'm doing a Zoom type meeting, I don't need to anymore.
Yeah.
Much different than the suit and tie of my original finance days. So you're doing, you know, dress clothing in large shape and sizes. What do you see as future of fashion, at least in your thoughts? Because I'm assuming there's your thoughts every day on this. And then how are you planning on kind of pivoting? I don't want to say we're pivot because that's other connotations. How do you intend on capitalizing on that and adapting to it?
Yeah, I think there's three big areas with that. First, let's just look at the pure uh, wholesale relationship side of it, and I think the idea of inventory, right? We spent time on that already, but that's something that this crisis is going to accelerate, and the move away from inventory. So that's something we're spending a lot of time on, and how do we best partner with our stores on that side of things. The other piece that I don't know will necessarily be accelerated by COVID is personalization, right? There's more and more of that, and I don't know that the social impact of COVID is going to get people to want more and more of that in a faster way than naturally would have happened. But that's something we're certainly watching closely and spending a lot of time on. The third area, I think, is just casualization, right? Like let's look at how our consumers going to behave in the next 6, 12, 18, 24 plus months. I personally believe there's going to be a lot more work from home, right? I've talked to numerous companies. We have seen it in the news of shifting to a remote work policy, which, to your point, you're not going to be wearing as many dress shirts, but you certainly will. I do believe that in New York, there's a lot of people starting to come back to the offices, particularly in the finance sector. I live in Hell's Kitchen, so I kind of walk over to Midtown periodically, just put the mask on and see what's happening. You certainly see the energy coming back in that area very slowly, albeit it's nothing like it used to be. So I think there will certainly be a need for dress clothing, but we can't ignore the fact that there's going to be more and more of a need for casual wear. So that's something we're spending a lot of time on while still refining our dress offering and working on some other garments.
Yeah, that was my big thought. So on casual wear, I get casual shirts.
Yep.
Would you ever get into casual denim, or is that kind of just too hard to do because it's a more I don't know anything about clothes manufacturing, but I figure that I understand like reams of cloth. It's a heck of a lot easier to move like a piece of wool or a piece of linen versus or cotton. Those are three. Sorry, that's like my entire knowledge base versus really thick denim for like from a jeans perspective. Do you see something? I'd be really curious about custom jeans. And here's my ignorance: is that even a thing?
Yeah, there's a lot of, if you take a pair of custom pants, which is something we're doing now, right? When COVID hit, we were right in the middle of our rollout of our pants program to stores, and something we're very excited about. We don't have a pure denim offering right now. It's something we're very excited about, but there's also different angles of casual pants, right? There's really stretchy fabrics. Like the shirt I'm wearing right now is very stretchy, right? It's super comfortable. So there's a lot of ways to tap into that casualization and comfort movement that I think is going to be accelerated. That was already here, right, before COVID, without necessarily doing denim, but it's certainly something that we are looking into.
So we got a question from someone in the audience here. So I'm going to read the whole thing. So I went to Nordstrom's website. It looks like a lot of shirts are on sale. Are they trying to incentivize potential new customers to try them out in this environment? So from their website, I did not see any incentive pricing or anything else like that. It seems that they are trying to get a customer to try out a new experience. What is the strategy to get potential customers to try them out now?
Yeah, I think what's fascinating about COVID is it impacts everybody, right? Like nothing else has in at least my recent memory, right? And I haven't been around all that long, so I'm sure there's other things that have impacted companies and consumers on a national basis, but I don't know to this degree. And I think what's happening is everybody's in that situation where they have too much inventory. So everybody's trying to push it. And once one person starts, another brand starts, another retailer starts. So, an environment we are very well aware of that we're in right now is promotional heavy. Now, Stant's in a unique position where we don't have inventory that we really need to push through, right? So we have that debate of, okay, do we compete and do some more incentive pricing that we normally wouldn't do? to steal more of the share, right? Or do we compete more just on our product itself? And kind of back to that question, I think a lot of retailers they have so much inventory to push through, so there's going to be a lot of discounting happening for the foreseeable future.
Oh, right. So it's now I'm thinking about, well, I've got a full closet. It might be time to.
A lot of, it's a lot of people that I've talked to are thinking that way, or there's people still spending money, right? And there's a whole other set of topics on who's been impacted by this more and socioeconomic classes, et cetera. But let's not dig into that. But I think there's a lot of people who are waiting for sales and they are still spending money, right? And that's where I think the market is where it is, and scary how high the market is relative to what's happening. But people are still spending money on things, and I think the sales are going to drive more of that spending.
So I'll ask a question. It's COVID related. It's also personal related, but instead of saying I have a friend who anonymously, it's just like, so how, and I want to say, how do you deal with weight gain? So this is the COVID, you call it the COVID-19, you could have the COVID-19 pounds. It could, and this is not a personal testament here, but I've been a customer shirt and Slack fan for ages. And you're now dealing with body types that have probably significantly changed due to sedentary life. We don't have to get into it. How do you deal with your clothes and what you build to give it's weird making a custom, but having enough wiggle room to allow for bodies to change over time? I
think that is inherent in what we do, right? So the idea of a perfect fit is subjective to each person. So, okay, that is something that you deal with, right? And we want to cater to that and say, okay, as we walk you through the process, do we want to add a little bit extra? So it's something that can be grown into or grow out of, if you will. There's other customers who don't have that issue. So that's part of, we try to be very human forward, if you will. And that's part of what I talked about talking to the stores, but that goes to our customers too, right? If they want to ask those questions, we're here to answer them and cater the product to them in that way. And that's inherent in what we do, right? We can customize any size that we have and really perfect it for what your needs are.
That's great. So 2 new questions came out. So one, what about clothing made out of hemp? Where do you see that trend going?
I'm not sure how to answer that one. Is it from a sustainability perspective?
So we'll see.
I honestly don't know how to answer that question.
All right, so let's see.
I think let's just call it, if it is a sustainability perspective, let's assume that. There's hemp clothing become more popular.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new fabrics coming out, a lot of new technologies, and it's certainly something that I think will continue, right? It's we all know apparel is one of the biggest wasting industries out there, and it's how do you, as an industry and then as a company, decrease our impact on the environment. And I'm excited to see all the new technologies that are out there, whether it's recycling, upcycling, organic materials, et cetera. So if it's along those veins, then absolutely, it's something I think is going to continue to happen, and we're tapping into, right? We have a sustainably sourced line of cloths already, and something where we do some programs where people can send in the clothing they no longer use. We give them discounts, but then we make sure they go into the hands of people in need versus just getting tossed in the trash. So it's something I think is very important.
Cool. Another question that popped in. How are you using social media to track business? And which also goes kind of the interesting thing about competing versus all these big players. And is anyone I'll even add to that, is anyone even paying attention to marketing right now?
Yeah, I think we've pulled back dramatically, and I've heard so many different stories from so many different founders and categories. I'm sure you and a lot of people on the phone have, and so much of it is dependent on what type of product you're selling. From what we've seen in the data and the metrics, this is not a great time for us to be spending a lot of money online, right? In acquisition, where our focus is on supporting our stores, which is the heart of what Stant is. So it's something that we're continuously evaluating and kind of probing, but right now we have pulled back quite significantly on that particular front. But that will come back, right? And the CPCs right now are, in the solid place, and I think there is a time when we'll be able to start ramping that side of things up.
So if we put our future lens, what do you think, as people talk about the new normal, like what they see coming, what do you see a couple of like future predictions that you're kind of banking on in your business?
Yeah, I think it's, more people working from home more consistently, right? Whether it's a full remote work situation or something that has a lot more flexibility. I do think more people are going to be moving out of urban areas. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, even very close friends who I never thought would leave New York are either leaving for a couple of months or permanently, a lot of them permanently. And I think the casualization trend, as it relates to our product particularly, is something that is absolutely going to continue.
Darn. Uh, what what do you think throughout this was like some of your biggest surprises? Um, let's start with pleasant surprises. Like it's like so it's uh, what do you what has through this process have you been really short of like wow, I never thought that that could happen or that would happen or something like that way, and I was just it's a great story.
Yeah, I think I'll start with the bad just to get it out of the way. I
Yeah.
think the speed and depth at which this impacted things was, I think, surprised all of us, right? And you can say, oh, we saw it coming, et cetera, but just how quickly and how severe the drop off was, it just is shocking, for lack of any better word. On the positive side, this remote work thing to me has been fascinating to experience personally, experience secondhand through our team, and then hearing our friends talk about it, or my friends talk about it as well. And I think it's something we're exploring as well, right? What does work look like for Stance moving forward? We have an office right in Midtown.
Yep.
We have a lot of stuff to touch and feel. We do merchandising, we deal with fabrics, we deal with fit, we deal with construction. So how do you tap into what I've found to be powerful in working from home and having the space to dig into products and innovation, but then also keep connectivity with your team, right? Nothing replaces that face to face. There's just nothing that does. And also deal with products, right? And allow people to touch and feel who need to and get their input on things. So that's I think been an interesting positive coming out of this.
So what are things? So I'm always curious. Like it's look, we've been a very heavy remote virtual-esque company since our founding, but you still have physical offices and we still do on-prem. And like, how what are you doing? I'll give you an example. One of the things that we did is we instituted a virtual coffee.
Mm-hmm.
So it's we've got people on West Coast, people on East Coast. So we pick 12 noon Eastern Standard for half hour that we have once a week stand time. We all get on a virtual coffee. So it's either lunchtime, certain people's households, it's way dinner time for other folks, or after dinner coffee, or we don't ask what people are drinking either. So and then it's it's early morning for some folks. And it's just a chance for now not everybody logs in, but it's a chance at least once a week for everyone just to see each other. And the conversation goes from what's up to this weird client thing popped up. Let's kind of like all kind of generate discussion. And it was interesting for us. It was like the first time we've ever had like everyone gathered almost in one spot on a regular basis. So that's something we've done and we're continuing to do. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so we've, one of the benefits of being face to face is we could have all of those people in a room before, right? So
Yeah.
we wanted to, how do we take the power of that and transition it to a digital environment? So we're meeting regularly as a full team, at least twice a week, if not three times, more business related, right? To make sure there's that connectivity across the major projects. But then usually on a weekly basis, we do some sort of happy hour game where we, put a game up on the screen and all play at the same time. There's so many cool ones out there now. The most recent one we've been playing is Drawful, which is so much fun, and it's everybody gets involved and engaged, and it's you let the guard down and just have fun. People may grab drinks, etc. But those have been a lot of fun. But it's certainly something that I'm curious how long that lasts, right? It's how do you really keep people engaged? And I think there's a moment where even if somebody is working remotely, driving some of that face to face is something that's very important. And how do we balance all of that out is something I'm going to be we're very keenly watching and trying to figure out.
One of the things I remember, so it was back in my bigger corporate days, and you probably saw the same thing at J&J, there are people who worked in satellite offices, there are people who work more remote. And sometimes that was the kiss of, not career death, but the kiss of career plateauing. And the number one thing that I remember a conversation I had with a friend, like, what was his views of that? And he says, well, there's a lot of conversations that happen in a hallway. There are a lot of conversations that happen, you can call it the water cooler, call it the coffee room, that you randomly walk into somebody, you have a piece of innovation, you talk about an issue, and then you've solved something, or you've agreed to something, or you've pushed something along. And that doesn't happen as easily remote. Right. Now, things have changed because people are so much used to, if they're using any type of online communication tool like Slack and the like, you can get a hold of something. So this was like pre a lot of that technology coming in. But I'm thinking that's going to be, how do we combat that? And also it really comes down to innovation. Like we have, like, based off of like how we've grown up, a lot of our innovation and team dynamics have been tactile. Face-to-face, tactile. My favorite is a whiteboard. Put up a whiteboard. I even look at my notes. My notes are gibberish. They're like a circle, 2 lines, but like if I'm able to like point back to that circle, and it happens to be like the main, and we're able to. Now I can never interpret my notes afterwards. It's hopefully no archaeologist ever finds them and says, what was he trying to communicate? But I say that because how do you, like, what are your thoughts on it? Because you're in fashion. Like, this is like, you're in fashion, you're in tech, you're in rapidly changing environment. How do you keep that creativity spark in the dynamic dynamism? I don't know how to say it. The dynamic culture and the ability to rapidly respond. But now your tired group dynamic is different.
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice I got as we've started on this journey of exploring remote work was, it's not one size fits all. And I think this person runs a major agency, right? And it's digital forward. And I think that was such an astute observation where it's like, okay, one size doesn't fit all company to company, right? I can't do what he's doing and have it work at our company. I also think one size doesn't fit all within the company, right? If somebody is really product based and is doing the innovation, are there certain people that need to come to the office periodically? As founders, do we need to be in the office more regularly? Like, should we truly be remote or not? Like, can I move to California and my business partner stay here? There's a lot of things like that we need to work through. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to like what makes the person happiest, right? And allows them to work to their strengths and be in an environment that allows them to work to their strength, and be what's best for the particular channel that they work in and segment that they work in. And I don't have any answers for it right now, to be honest. It's something that is very top of mind for us, and I'm really excited to work through. I will say, I think this accelerates and really opened my eyes to the idea of remote work and how forward we can go with it as a company. I remember when I was at J&J, it was pulling teeth to get every other Friday work from home, and we were commuting an hour and a half each way.
Yep.
It was that commute was just brutal. And
which office?
Skillman.
In the middle of nowhere.
We had a shuttle that drove us back and forth.
Sorry. For those not in the know, Skillman, huge facility, middle of nowhere. Sorry.
Yeah, not a lot around. So, but it was an interesting experience that really shapes how I look at things now, where as a corporation, I get why they want you in person. I get it, right? There's people who abuse the systems. There's people who it could quell innovation. You're working on major launch teams with 15 people in a room and doing big presentations. But at the same time, if you allow somebody some more flexibility, I probably would have stayed there longer. So it's like, do you want to lose a really amazing person because you're sucking them dry from an energy perspective as they're commuting so far? Or do you give more flexibility? And I think the right level of flexibility and making sure all the pieces pull together the right way is so empowering for individuals and for a company.
So it's interesting to say this. If we go to the work, so one thing that I found, you mentioned an hour and a half commute. I'm in Jersey. I'd go into New York for my office. I found that I have more hours in the day now.
Yeah.
Some of them are much less productive because everyone's cooped up in the house and you got telelearning and uh, tele homeschooling, whatever we're calling it now. But I used to get up at 4:30 to hit the gym, then to get the kids ready, help out the family, and then get on a bus. Now I can get up at 6,
Yeah.
and I don't even know, like that's like unreal for me. So I found that I'm getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, which was
Mhm.
I was lucky if I got 6. So I find that while I'm going to be really happy when things open up, I don't know if I want to give that up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
I mean, look, sleep is one of the most important things for your livelihood, right? And your energy and your engagement and your optimism. And it impacts it's so many studies on that, right? That's
yeah,
obvious. And it's been, I think with anything, there's the goods and bads of it, right? The pro of this I've experienced the same as you is like, yeah, I sleep in more, right? There's not as much urgency to make sure an alarm is set so you can get to the gym, so you can get to the office before people and get those big projects done before people start to come in and get distracted, yada, yada, yada. I think for me personally, the challenge has been reestablishing that routine
yeah,
and reestablishing without all of the tools, right? Where for me, a big tool, if you will, was going to the gym, right?
yeah,
And it's there, it's an energizing
yep,
environment. You're tired when
very
you
much
wake
so.
up, you walk downstairs, the lights come on, you smell it, you start your workout, and all of a sudden you have energy. Now it's like I have these dumbbells in the corner of my apartment and a
Yeah,
shitty bench from Amazon. You can hardly
mm,
do a workout. So it's how do I get back into that rhythm with a different set of tools? And then what is the new rhythm, right? When gyms
mm,
are opening back up, like, can I go to the gym? What does that look like? Is it
yep.
5 still, or is it 6? And I always try to go early because our gym gets
Mm,
so crowded by
mm.
7:30 or 8, and you have to wait on stuff.
We just had a BER on that with a gym member, so it's a gym owner on Gorilla Fitness. So definitely, I'm in talks with him because that's mine. I Same thoughts, and even though they open up, and would I even be comfortable going back?
Yeah.
Uh, we got a couple more questions that popped up. All right, following up on Aaron's point about weight gain, does your business model allow people to send back what they originally ordered slash got from you that no longer fits? Can you retailer the item to fit the individual for a charge, of course? So,
That's something that doesn't happen a lot, but look, we try not to put pure guardrails on every process we do, right? So I think a lot of it's about what is the individual situation, how long they have the garment. In the end of the day, we are all about our customers. We can't survive without the customer, so we really try to lean forward and do whatever we can to make them happy.
that's great. A couple of the questions, and I've got some generic ones for you. So, what about other items than men's shirts, women's, teenager shoes? This is more future strategy for you, but
Yeah, it's something we're spending a lot of time on, right? In the end of the day, it's business all comes down to cost of acquisition and LTV, right? And the more products we have, the more people we're going to appeal to initially, right? Which in theory decreases your CAC. A lot of factors that go into that, obviously. And then the more product we have to sell to the individual customer longer, or the bigger our LTV is going to be. So it's something that we want to provide an amazing fit, really great quality for the money, amazing service to our customer across the board in his and her closet. Um, I think there's also value from a brand benefit perspective of being able to fully outfit somebody, right? Take out the styling and shopping and how can we put somebody in a full wardrobe that they look amazing in. It just makes it super simple, right? And that's, I think, our core customer. They're very busy, they want to look good, it's important, but it's not always something they want to spend a lot of time on, and we can really help with that when we have more garments in the closet.
awesome. Something you just said, and this actually really intrigued me. CAC and LTV, so customer acquisition cost and lifetime value of a customer now. I used to think LTV was loan to value back in my finance days. And this is recorded,
Means
so
different
now
things to different
yeah,
people.
different things to different people. So I ask you, so you're coming from J&J, right? Super corporate. When I was in the big corporate world, I never heard these terms. I mean, I've heard of different, but I always associate CAC and LTV with the tech world. So I find it fascinating that a clothing manufacturer, and I know you're much more than that, is using those terms. Do you think it's because you're in the startup scene? Do you think it's because of the types of investors that you have? Like, when did you start thinking in those terms?
It's a really good question. The first two things that come to mind are the stage of the company and the categories they sell. So, you look at J&J. I mean, these were huge, 500, $600 billion brands that we were working on. And the core channel was through retailers. And when you're selling that way, it really limits the amount of data you can collect about the customer, because it's A, the store a lot of times aren't collecting it, and B, they're most likely not going to share it with you. So, not to say it wasn't the right thing for them to do, but these brands have been around for such a long time, and they were built on that channel. So I think it just became part of the DNA, because that's what drove success. My gut would be a lot of these brands are starting to evolve how they think about that. However, when they've been doing it the same way for 100 plus years, and the people have been trained to think that way, it's a very hard thing to change. I think with our category, it's something we will always think about, even if we are a huge, huge company one day, because we can track that stuff, right? And we can try new things to make sure we are making our customer happier. And at the end of the day, LTV is one of the best metrics of that, net promoter score, et cetera. And there's so much we can do there to make sure our customer loves the product and loves the experience. And I think it's a key measure of that.
So I'll end us with this. So you've talked a lot about customer centric. You've talked a lot. Oh, got another question here. So I will I'll ask that question first, and then I'll come to what I was saying. So I used to, one of our panelists, I used to work for Payless Shoe Source, executive editor. When we were growing and adding one store on average once a day, we were thriving and would never predicted that we would go into chapter 11. What is the biggest unknown and fear you have to be a lasting company into the future? Oh, no pressure.
No,
That's true.
look,
Yeah,
it
it's true.
just goes back to what we were talking about before with how we're reacting to how's the strategy. And I think these are the questions you have to ask, right? And I think the biggest unknown for us right now is, when is the demand via our core channel and for our product going to come back, right? And I do think it will come back. Whether it's at the level it was before, I'm not sure, but that's something we spend a lot of time thinking about. And then it's, okay, let's just not sit and wait for it to happen. How do we be very proactive and tap into some of these trends that we talk to? And but if men stop buying dress shirts, we're not to say we're screwed, but we're in trouble. But that's not going to happen, right? It's more of how long does it take to come back? And look, if that does happen, we're going to do something, right? We're not just going to sit here and let that happen to us. And how do you evolve and pivot? And it's part of the startup journey and the small company journey.
So I right there with you. It's so I've noticed a theme with everyone we've brought on. Maybe it's biased just for the people that I do bring on, but it's very customer focused and mission driven.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed a lot as he's doing right by the customer and thinking about this. So if I had to ask you, and you don't have to read off your mission statement, if you could think about missions and mission and values, and forget how we would define those, but it's what do you think yours are?
Yeah, to me, it's really empowering people to be their best selves. And there's so many ways to do that, right? From just a clothing perspective, like, how do you put your best foot forward, right, when you're in the meeting or where it matters most? And I think that can go up to much bigger levels, like with our team. How do we support them in being the best versions of themselves? It's, how do we lead and how do we interact with them? How do we support training? And we're working on, I don't want to share much about it now, but working on some really, really amazing things from a social impact perspective, where indirectly or directly, by participating in Stant and being one of our customers, you're going to be able to do more good in the world, right? And help others and empower their best selves. There's so many ways we can do that. It's what got us really thinking hard about the remote work idea, right? Where it's like, how do we empower individuals to be their best selves as partners and employees of Stant? And something we're really excited to keep exploring.
I'm excited to hear about it. I'm looking forward. So we're coming up to the end. I want to be cognizant of time. Any parting advice to entrepreneurs? Any message you want to give the audience? Especially if you're, in the retail space and you're scared, you're trying to trug along, like any words of thoughts and message out to them?
Yeah, I think just be proactive, right? I think that's one of the, it's really easy to get down and be like, oh, this sucks, right? But yeah, it does. But there's always something that you can be proactive about in addressing that. So I think that's just something that we've tried to do a lot of and continue to remind ourselves to do a lot of.
That's great. It's always a pleasure talking to you. We talk probably at least once a month. Uh, I'm looking forward to one day of you going down your partner's path and coming out to sunny Garden State of New Jersey.
One of these days.
Montclair is welcome and open to you. The town near mine. I live in a very leafy suburban suburb, so I think Montclair is probably. Now I'm doing. What am I? What is this? What is this interview got to? This is going to like a booster for New Jersey. Never thought I'd see the day.
Oh, okay.
So maybe we'll edit that out. No, Jersey's great. Now you've got me recorded live on international distribution. I was saying Jersey's great. It's been a pleasure having you. I'm super excited to see what you're doing. Thank you. I think I think look, I've always been a booster believer in you. I think you've shared a lot of wisdom here. The folks can really appreciate and delve into. Don't be a stranger. Looking forward to keep talking. And thank you again for being on. Eric, that's a wrap. We can pop this over. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Take care, everybody.